Who's ready to win the day in sports? I know you are. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com, Monday through Friday, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Justin Fensterman, and let's break everything down from a fantasy sports perspective. What is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. My name is Justin Fensterman. You can follow me at Fensty Sports on X and Instagram, FENSTY Sports. Head up a lot of the NBA content that we have going on at FantasyGuru.com, where you can find all my work. Hell, that's where you can find everything that we have related at the good old FG. And being that this is an extension of FantasyGuru.com, Fantasy Sports Daily, Ray Flowers hosts this show Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Ray is on with Jeff Mans on the Elite Sports Show, which now airs at 2 p.m. Eastern. Want to make sure everybody is aware of that, because when we're in a routine, and we're going to talk a lot about this today, being in a routine, and then when things change, meaning you're mid-draft, you're rocking and rolling, you got some guys in your queues, boom, 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 off the board. Now what the heck do you do? Going to talk all about that in prioritization when it comes to draft, pre-draft, in-draft for fantasy football drafts. I am so pumped about that because we've got our guide out. We've got our guide that's going to be with you for the entire season, not just drafts, but season as well. And put this link out there right there for you. For those that have not joined the Elite Mafia at FantasyGuru.com, you have a ton of different packages to choose from. If you're a bettor, you only care about betting, you don't care about DFS, you don't care about fantasy, you just want the betting aspect, separate package there. If you're just a DFS maniac, then boom, DFS package. Just a season-long person, separate package for that, or you bundle them all together, and that is how you get involved for the season with a lot of our content already out, rocking and rolling. I have a little bit more content that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. Ray Flowers and I actually tag teaming our auction content, or for some of those that know, salary cap drafts, which really salary cap is a completely different thing, but I'm a big time auctions guy. I've been kind of grazing it on this show a bit, but I'm going to talk a little bit more at length as the weeks go on. With no more basketball really going on outside of Summer League, and let's talk about that. A few things I actually want to talk with all of you about here. Here's the agenda. Here's what's going on. Number one, Elite Sports Game Time on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio is now done for the remainder of the season and likely 2025, and that is because it is scheduled as such that we are a spring, Ray Flowers, yours truly, Game Time, a spring and early summer show as the channel now shifts to really all football dominating programming. But it was a great time. It's been a great last couple of years being on the Game Time show with Ray, and I hope we can be back hanging out with you on SiriusXM Channel 87 Fantasy Sports Radio next year and beyond. It was scheduled. It was nothing that just came out of nowhere, which happens more often than you think in this world of radio and sports media. So you always got to be on your toes when you're in this business. But this time it was scheduled, and Ray and I were not caught off by surprise, but we're very thankful to SiriusXM and our brass at FantasyGuru.com, Rob Brink, the model, MLB model, and of course Jeff Mans, for bringing the show back once again. It's a ton of fun, but no more Game Time. So now everything focuses on, as it always does, to Jeff Mans' Elite Sports Show, 2 p.m. Eastern, 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Ray Flowers with Jeff every single Wednesday. But that's not all you get, by the way, because Jeff also has his One Man's Opinion weekly podcast coming out, normally drops on Wednesdays. So be on the lookout for that. A lot of strategies in those podcasts that you can definitely look at and also really start to figure out your own draft plan. Jeff speaks very freely. It's a very fun conversation always, and that's why when it comes to the conversational tone of sports, and definitely of fantasy sports, because it could get a little crazy with the terminology, the analytics. But Jeff, more of a blue-collared style kind of host there, wants to make sure everything is explained, because we never know how advanced you are that are watching and that are listening to our shows, because there's a lot out there that we can look at. There are a lot of people that throw out these analytics and everything, different and new analytics. But it's one thing being able to throw out those analytics, whether you're a host or a consumer when it comes to these sports shows. It's another being able to live the analytic, understand it, and explain it to someone who might not be as familiar. And that's why when you join the Elite Mafia, you're riding with the Mafia, you're riding with the family, and that's what it's all about at fantasyguru.com. Rich Maletto is going to stop by in just a little bit. I almost want to create a fun bit, the Cleveland Browns report of the week, because Rich always defends the Browns and always interested in what he has to say on a team that has a lot of questions. And speaking of the Browns, there are other teams that we have some questions about on whether or not we're going to be actively targeting multiple options from. I got to question teams like the Falcons, got to question team like the Colts, and I'm going to talk with Rich all about that. As you see here, I still have it listed because I know that this is a big setup couple of weeks we have going on when it comes to fantasy football league setup. And I've seen a few people, a few trolls on social media commenting, especially what they're hearing on fantasy sports radio, what they're seeing on social media, the importance of league setup. And I went over a lot of that last week, and you could check out all of our episodes on YouTube and at fantasyguru.com if you want the audio version. We put that up on the site of Fantasy Sports Daily after the fact here, after we're done. And by the way, you can comment, you can ask questions, and I'm hanging out with you because this is your time here. And we want to make sure that you're organized. We want to make sure that you're ready to go when it comes to your fantasy football leagues. And that starts from the beginning. And that's why I have this right here in case you're tuning in, you missed last week. You got to understand that if you don't put the time in to set up your fantasy football leagues or make sure that every single rule is checked out, then you're going to end up with a problem and you're not going to be able to change most of it once your draft room opens up. It's easy to hit the setup league button. It's another thing to make sure it's set up correctly. And a few people are like, that's basic, commissioners. I hear about this all the time. I hear about mistakes made in leagues every single year. Every year. Enough with the commissioner. I see the mistakes happen. I see it in expert leagues. I see it in industry leagues. If I'm seeing it there, then you know it's happening in casual leagues. And that's why it's very important, because if you don't change these rules, then your waiver order is not only going to be waiver priority, but it's going to be some stupid crap as reverse order of standings for waiver prioritization, which I think sucks unless you're in a dynasty league. Okay, maybe you could sell me on a keeper league. I asked Rich about this last week. But outside of that, a redraft league, your basic redraft league, inverse of order when it comes of standings for waiver priority, that sucks. It's bad. It's not fun. Oh, but what about those last place teams? Do better on managing during the week. We all have bad drafts, but we all can overcome bad drafts. So that's why you got to make these changes. So that's all I'm really going to say about that, because you see it right there. And if you don't change these defaults, because these are default settings right here, that's going to be problematic for your league. So you could check out the default settings and everything, and you could see what sites like Yahoo and ESPN offer. And you got to make sure you change this stuff, because waivers, free agent acquisition budget, that's really what it's all about now. Waiver priorities passe. Inverse of order of standings in redraft leagues that aren't dynasty should not happen. Shouldn't happen at all. Let's talk about, before we get to roster management strategy, a few of you have also been asking me, well, Fensty, where now can we find specifically your work and everything? Always at fantasyguru.com. But I have a basketball podcast, because normally on Wednesdays, you get a lot of basketball with yours truly. It breaks things up a little bit. It breaks things up. Ray talks, hits baseball very, very hard. We're always hitting football every single day. But I'm normally kind of your basketball guy, so I make it more of a basketball intense show. Free agency, the big names and everything, at least for now, things are calming down a little bit. We've had 2 trades. I'm going to talk about them on Fedsteve's Basketball Diaries. Weekly podcast I have at fantasyguru.com. You have to be part of the Elite Mafia to check it out. It is not on Apple, Spotify. It's not on any of those. You have to make sure that you are part of the Elite Mafia to check it out. I talk about different topics. I talk about futures now. And now I can really start getting into it with free agency. I don't want to say starting to wind down, but calming down a little bit. We've had trades. Norman Powell going to the Heat in a 3-teamer. John Collins going to the Clippers. The Clippers on paper could look like a pretty solid force, but it all comes down to the usual, the health of Kawhi Leonard. So that's what you need to know about that and that trade. Nothing too major right there. The Spurs getting Kelly Olynyk from the Wizards, who continue to get young guards, not proven, that can use more playing time, some proven that need more minutes. So the Wizards are doing a great job on their rebuild. They get guys like Blake Wesley and even Malachi Branham, who I liked a couple of years ago on the Spurs. Nice little spark scorers. So I'll talk more about that in the podcast for this week. Coming out tomorrow, Fensty's Basketball Diaries, your weekly NBA podcast at fantasyguru.com. Fun day, by the way, of baseball coming up, so make sure you check out all of our analyst content, games throughout the day. But tonight, I am supposed to be going to Camden Yards, my first in-person baseball game of the season, to see my New York Mets, who starting to get their groove back a little bit. Went on a pretty big slump, but now won 5 of their last 6, so things are looking up against the Baltimore Orioles here. The only problem is, and this is something that you all have to look out for, it probably is the biggest risk when it comes to weather. And that's why you got to be careful, and Ray talks about it all the time. You got to be careful when setting your DFS lineups and even placing your bets early, because you might not have a specific batter that you're targeting in wagers and in DFS. They may not be in the lineup, but then you might have a game like this in Baltimore tonight where I've never seen anything like this. I'm going to this game with fellow Orioles fan Phil Backert, so it's funny. It's going to be like the odd couple tonight at Camden Yards if this game goes. I've never, ever, and I look up a lot of weather. I was very into earth science when I was in high school. Very random, I know. But I learned how to read the contour lines when it comes to a weather map or a weather radar. And just looking at the humidity alone, I've never seen, or at least haven't seen in a long time, a weather forecast where you have 9 straight hours of thunderstorms with humidity in that 80% range or above. For those that don't know science, the higher the humidity, and they take each percentage, you got to take it seriously. So you see something like 98, way different than like an 84% humidity. Higher the humidity, the more likely chance that it will rain. And I said this to Phil Backert before. You can find his work at fantasyguru.com as well. Phil, I said to him, there's probably a 68% chance this game gets rained out with all the storms. And by the way, this is what the East Coast has been in 2025. All spring, the rain has not gone away. So we'll see if this game gets going. I believe it's Sugano versus David Peterson scheduled tonight. So be careful when you're setting your DFS lineups, or be careful when you're setting or placing bets for this specific game. It was an exciting night last night, but at the same time, wow, tonight, a lot of rain in the area. So make sure you keep it locked in there. Playbooks, of course, will have that in mind coming out on the site. So before we talk about roster management strategies, a piece of news actually dropped that could impact a lot of things here, a lot. And that's, we're finding out that Tristan Wirfs, the left tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is actually having knee surgery, and that's going to set him out a bit. I know a lot of you are probably like, oh, wait, wow, okay, at least he's having it now. That gives him about 2 months in order to get ready for the start of the season. Well, we're already getting reports. Adam Schefter on the case, as he always is. He's saying, and he's reporting, that Wirfs is going to likely miss time, could even start the year on PUP, which means 4 weeks gone. Not good there. Not good for that Buccaneers passing attack. And that's because one of the things with Tampa Bay that they were so dominant and potent in overall, and by the way, you could go and check out our offensive line breakdowns piece that we have going on. Armando Marsal, Ted Schuster, tag teaming that one. And so that is a very fantastic article. And that's the first thing you got to think about at that point. And that's why these articles exist, and they're here for you throughout the season. Big time left tackle that is a top 10 when it comes to being on that offensive line in the league, especially when it comes to pass blocking. Tristan Wirfs being there versus him not being there, major impact piece. And by the way, yeah, you're thinking, okay, well, how's that going to impact Baker Mayfield? He's missing 4 games. So what? So what? That's a lot of protection right there with him alone. And I know that they have Kadecki and everything. I know that they still have him and on the right side, and that's going to help out. And they've got Malk as well on the right side. I understand that, but at the same time, not having Tristan Wirfs is huge. This team was incredible when it came to pass blocking. They gave Baker Mayfield time. And Baker Mayfield, we know he has a lot of weapons he could throw to, but he's going to need some time right there to get that release out. Not having Wirfs now for at least 4 games, or I don't want to say that's not confirmed. But at the same time, you got to think that knee surgery, is he going to be fully ready in a couple of months? You got to be thinking he's missing the first month of the season or up to. We'll have more on that, but that impacts Baker Mayfield, and that impacts those pass catchers too. And whether or not they're going to get the quality of target, if that's going to go down, if Baker doesn't have time to be as locked in on whoever it is, then you have to start to wonder, well, if he's not going to have that much time, is the quality of his throw is going to go down with no Tristan Wirfs? That's huge. We saw this a couple of years ago that the Bucs line was just shattered, and we saw how things changed very quickly versus what we thought we were going to have with that offensive line going into the season. Now, without Tristan Wirfs, that is going to be massive for this line. So you're thinking who can replace him? There's really no one that can make that kind of impact. Somewhat of an impact. Do they have decent options? Yes. But to ask for someone to step into the shoes of Tristan Wirfs, that left side, that's going to be a big-time problem. And Baker Mayfield won't have as much of a time, at least, when it comes to throwing the ball. Now, can they adjust? Can they try to bring someone in? They can, but that's a loose timetable, by the way. So you got to be thinking at this point if you're going to be investing in Baker Mayfield, which I have not just yet. And even with Tristan Wirfs, yeah, it's a bit of a sting when it comes to overall interest because he needs time. But at the same time, you're looking at a guy who's now dropping a few picks since I last checked. I've been looking at multiple draft boards, not to see where necessarily I'm going to be drafting this guy, but seeing how much we could get away if we really want to target Baker Mayfield. Well, Baker Mayfield is going as a borderline 7th round pick now. So I can imagine for those early drafters out there that are going to see this news regarding Tristan Wirfs, you might see him drop a little bit more solidly into that round. And that makes things very interesting because it's not like he doesn't have weapons. He's got multiple weapons, veteran, rookie, multiple weapons he could go to. And Bucky Irving was able to help his own cause moving down the field. I'll say this. Now you got to wonder, well, this impacts greatly. This happening impacts someone like Baker Mayfield. Well, what about the rushing attack here too? Because as a run blocking team, it wasn't great last year. They've got some guys that are decent, especially when it comes to run blocking, but overall as a team, not that great, but Bucky Irving was able to succeed still. So they may have to establish him a little bit more. There could be a little bit more wear on tear regarding Bucky Irving, but you're looking at a guy who last season not only showed that ability, but rushed for over 1,100 yards. So 8 on the ground, was able to control the rock for the most part. Also a pass catching threat, which something else that makes me maybe this piece of news, because it's not like you're making a move there. The Wirfs news, it does make things a little bit more interesting because if Baker Mayfield doesn't have as much time to throw, get some of his receivers, especially deep, well, might rely on Bucky Irving a little bit more out of the backfield. And that's where he can land a few more receptions. So this can actually work here if he needs to get the ball out quick. Irving had nearly 50 catches last year. So, yeah, it's not like I wasn't targeting Irving or anything like that, but it definitely does make me a little bit more interested. And talking with our analysts, and by the way, that's where Discord comes in. We have a very largely active Discord community at fantasyguru.com, and that's where you could start to look and be like, well, maybe Bucky Irving gets a few more passes thrown his way. Let's say they're rushing at Baker Mayfield. They may need him to block a little bit, but then boom, he could just get out there, get open for a few yards, get some positive yardage from there too. Because if we were able to see him still be able to evade tacklers, then he's going to be able to do that after he gets the rock too. So I know that momentum, it'll take him a while, a little bit longer, catching passes like that to establish that momentum. But he proved last year that he could be a threat. Did not get into the end zone via reception, but still 8 on the ground last year. And just seeing him average nearly 5.5 yards per game, or per carry rather. Just absolutely incredible seeing that. And it does make me a little bit more interested. So that's a piece of news right there that is going to create some waves. And especially because it's not a question of whether or not the timetable is going to be close. It's really looking like he's going to be missing multiple games, Tristan Wirfs. And Tristan Wirfs is just that damn good. So that stinks for them. A few of you have been asking me about roster management strategies because I was talking about that on the Elite Sports Game Time show and what I try to do. And I've changed my strategy as fantasy football has changed over the last few years. And we're talking like 10 years ago, let's just say. It's still the running back, get your running backs. Get your 3-down stud. There aren't as many of them anymore. And it's forced me to open my mind up because I play in a lot of leagues where it's 3 wide receivers starting leagues, which I prefer over the 2 wide receivers. 2 wide receivers and 2 flexes to me is an equivalent to 3 wide receivers and 1 flex. To me, if you're going to start 2 wide receivers and that's it, which by the way, defaults, I'm telling you right now, if you do not make that change, your league will have 2 wide receivers starting and 1 flex. So you got to make sure you make that change. Generally what you see, and I'll say this, what you'll hear from our analysts, they're thinking 3 wide receiver starting league because everybody has a different format when they're giving their analysis. And you try to appeal to everyone. And for me, 3 wide receivers, 1 flex, 12-team league, that's what I'm looking at. 5 or 6 bench spots, that's fine. But that to me, half PPR. When I'm giving analysis, I'm kind of basing it off that unless directly asked about a standard league, or as a lot of you know, non-PPR. So I just want to say that for analysts out there, when you're not giving what your league formats are, that's kind of my personal standard right there. Half PPR, not full, half PPR, 12-team, 3 wide receivers starting instead of 2. Although, again, you don't make that change, you're going to have 2 wide receivers starting. I'm in a league right now because it's important to know the formats and everything. I'm in a league right now that I'm sure a few of you are hearing about there. It's a league for charity, actually. Fantasy Cares, which, by the way, if you go and check out Fantasy Cares, you could donate. It's an excellent charity that's all involved with fantasy football, analysts playing with just the players, a lot of different divisions, an overall winner. But the bottom line is it's for charity. But this league always has some very unique rules. So one of those unique rules, or one thing about this league, it's all flexes. It's all flexes. So for me, while I'm seeing a lot of people in my particular draft still draft, because I'm telling you, this is a league where I'm starting about 7 or 8 flexes and then 10 flexes, and 2 of those spots are super flex. But that's all it is. Flexes all across the board with 2 super flexes, max, starting. So for me, while I'm seeing some other people try to still create rosters, should they get the running back here, I'm going after guys because in this particular league too, it's 2.5 points per reception. And the reason I'm explaining all this is because you got to know your format. You got to know your rules. Not everything you see with average draft position or even rankings may not apply to your league. You have to go after the guys you want sometimes. In this league, for instance, I got Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown. Yeah, you would wonder how you could get this league in an auction. That probably costs you a combined $140 of your $200 budget, maybe even more. I think I'm being generous, probably $145, $150 to get those 3 guys. No one way to build your roster. But that's why it's important to know your format and your rules, because I'm sure a few people are looking at me being like, how stupid is this guy? No quarterbacks. He's not even drafting a running back yet. It's all flexes starting. So that's why you got to know there are a lot of different formats and rules out there. Next week, I'll put out there a few more players and targets and strategy notes in this doc, but I do feel like this is important. A few of you came to me and were like, wow, I didn't realize that. So for one more week, you get to see this doc right here and some of the defaults. But yeah, that's what we're looking at when it comes to strategy with roster building. With me, I'm now more open to best player available. And this is the non-super flex league. I'm not looking to check boxes. I used to be that person. Now, no mas. If anything, I'm looking at a little bit more on the receiver heavy builds, and you got some good options towards the end of your drafts where I've just happened to be, whether it's been best ball or some of these redrafts that I've been a part of already, I've been at the end of the snake. So I've been in that 8 to 12 range. So I've seen what you're looking at there. You could get someone like an A.J. Brown right there, very close. Derrick Henry, few people in, few people out on Derrick Henry. A-Chan, you get him around there. Maybe A.J. Brown drops to you too. So there are a lot of good wide receivers there. And I know I mentioned some running backs if you wanted to go running backs. That's who I'm seeing really end up there consistently because every draft is different. So we'll go over more roster building strategies, but now to welcome to the main stage here, as I do every single week, here he is live from the Midwest. It's the Bosco himself. It is Rich Maletto from fantasyguru.com. And make sure you don't follow me on X at Fantasy Bosco. What's going on, Rich? How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Justin?
I'm good. So I've been kind of mixing in some, little bit of news talk here with formats. I forget if I asked you this last week. I know last week was a little bit crazy, but I spent a lot of the time last week and a few minutes here on this show talking about the importance of making sure you're going through each rules if you're setting up a new league, whether it's on Yahoo or ESPN, for instance. And there are a lot of default settings that aren't favorable. And one of them that seems to be pretty basic, but you still see happen all the time, 2 versus 3 wide receiver starting leagues. And I contend that a lot of us analysts out there, if we're being asked questions and not being given all the format details, we're going to be judging it like the question, like it's 3 wide receivers starting. So I'm guessing from your reaction here, you prefer 3 wide receivers starting as opposed to 2 in leagues.
I'm okay with 2 if you have enough flex spots.
That's what I was saying. 2 and 2 flexes, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, and today that format worked better when we played standard, touchdown only, that sort of stuff. And before the NFL, back when you had 8, 10, 12 running backs with 300 carries or more. We don't have that. It's a whole different game. And if you want to take some of the randomness out of it, keep your waiver wires fresh, but yet tough, not having gimmies on there, I think you have to have 3 receivers. One of the leagues that I'm in that I run that's very slow to change, we all agreed to go to 3 receivers, and we're all much happier for it. I can't get them to add a flex spot yet, but that's beside the point. If you're going to do 2 RBs, and in fact, I could argue, if you really want to look at an ideal setup, in my opinion, 1 running back, 2 receivers, and we're talking like 4 or 5 flex.
Ooh, I like that.
That gives you multiple options as far as, if the running backs are there, or you want to be running back heavy. But I also like, doing some tiered scoring, like maybe 0.5 for the running back receptions, but 0.75 for receivers, sure. 1 point for tight end. It's not really true tight end premium, but we are giving a little bit more love to the tight end. So maybe we get beyond those 7-8 point standard games, right? At least getting closer to that 10-point threshold that we chase as a regular basis. I like going heavy flex because I want options with my builds. I don't like being forced into, and even the way I play, a lot of times my receiver 3 is more of a flex guy because I want a couple of anchors. If we're going to have 2 running backs, I want 2 running backs I can count on, which means I'm going to have to sacrifice someplace, especially in today's drafts where everybody's going heavy on receiver. You can get away with 2, but that 3rd receiver. But I would argue, honestly, a bye week flyer, it's a lot easier to take a shot on a random receiver due to injuries to someone in front of them or matchups even, and chasing that 7, 8, 9, 10 point threshold at receiver. unless there's an injury and everybody's bidding on that running back in that case, you're not going to find that with the running backs as you try to fill holes. So if you don't handcuff and you don't buy into that and you're got everybody else's handcuffs and they don't have injuries, it's real difficult to find a running back that's going to get you more than 5 or 6 points. Whereas, you can find receivers. I mean, Jalen McMillan was an easy pickup last year at the end, obviously, when Mike Evans got hurt, but perfect bye-week fill-in as needed, and he put up major double-digit points. Unless there's a significant, and that team had multiple injuries. I mean, you lost Godwin, you lost Evans, you lost a lot of things before that became relevant. It was very much at the end of the year. But I'll Band-Aid receiver 3, so I can understand someone's argument about why. But if we want to take the randomness out of this and make it challenging and fun, I think you have to have 3 receivers.
Rich,
or like I said, heavy flex.
You're in Scott Fish, right? You're
Yes,
in the
sir.
Scott Fish Bowl. I was just talking about that, the draft that we were just discussing, Fantasy Cares for Charity. It's all flexes, and I've never been in a league like that. And I like it. I think it's great. I think, honestly, it's because so far my build in that league, and by the way, once again, in that league, 12 teams, but you've got its third round reversal to, just for the draft purposes, to give you context, it's all flexes, and you have 2 possible super flex spots. But I'm playing on sleeper, and it's 2.5 points per reception. Whereas if you're playing on my fantasy league, it's 1.5 points per reception. And how about this? 1 point just for the target. So if you're playing on my fantasy league, Rich, I'll tell you this. My league kind of stumbled out of the gate because two separate people got kicked out in the first round.
What?
Yeah, man, because look, you have to make your first round pick. And Scott Fish warned you about that. We had 2 separate people get kicked out of my league in the first round. Rich, I just made my first round pick like last night. Now it's starting to move a little bit. The rest of the league's like, we got to get this thing freaking going. So now everybody's like on it. So my team so far, just for context sake, I picked up at 12 on the wheel. St. Brown, Lamb, A.J. Brown. Heavy volume receivers. How can I not be happy with that? It's all flexes while everybody else is trying to like build around and still make sure they've got their one running back.
Are you sure it's 1.5 for reception on MFL? Because I feel like it's 1. It is 1 for the target, and it's an extra 1 for the tight end. But I'm almost positive it's 1 for the reception.
I thought it was 1.5 and 1, and then on sleeper it was 2.5 for the reception because he couldn't obviously make the same rule.
Same, right. I'll go back because I've been drafting. Because here's the deal on MFL, receiver scoring's down. So I did the exact opposite you did. I also picked 12, and I just made my third round pick last night. I went, and I understand I made a reach, but I can't stop loving this guy. I debated over and over which angle I wanted to go. I started out Derrick Henry, Jaden Daniels, and came back and got Kenneth Walker. And what I'm banking on is the 0.5 point per carry. Kenneth Walker and Derrick Henry both averaged 33 and 34 points last year. And a lot of that is because of the 0.5 point per carry. I mean, if you can stockpile run it, and Tyler has this on his Scott Fish strategy guide. He's going heavy running back as well. He and we talked about it on the coaching stream last night with Russ. We're both all about the volume chasing. Like I said, I'm okay kind of skating behind receiver because I'm not even looking for efficient receivers. I just want volume receivers. I mean, you're going to get 1 point per target. So those guys that get 6 to 8 targets and only catch 3 balls a week, so what?
Right.
So what? I mean, that's enough massive points. So if I could my goal was to get 2 to 3 running backs that I feel like I have this ceiling of 18 to 20 carries a week. I want that on my roster because just from getting the ball, no matter how terrible they are with the ball, we're talking 8-9 points. Doing nothing.
True. That's true. That is
so.
True. See, this just shows there are different ways to build these teams. Neither one of us are wrong. At the end of the day, we both have awesome teams.
That's why I love the flex. Now, last year, if I remember correctly, he did require like 1 QB, 1 running back, 1 receiver, 1 tight end, and the rest were flex. I kind of dig that because it does kind of force you to have some sort of resemblance of normalcy, if you will. I'm kind of digging this year, and that's why I'm not even fretting a receiver. If I can keep stockpiling these running backs that I think can average 30 to 35 points a game, Fenstey, that's more than Joe Burrow averaged in this set.
Right.
And Joe Burrow's Mr. Touchdown. Like, I very much mulled it over. Do I go Burrow here for a second QB? And I'm like, in all fairness, if Walker ends up being volume, now I painted myself in a hole here because I'm going to have to reach on Charbonnet. Like, I am pot committed now taking Walker this early where, in a lot of redrafts, you're able to get him 4th, 5th round. I understand going first pick in the 3rd round, but to give you an idea who the players went after that, Kamara, who averaged 38 last year, but I'm worried. I mean, part of that is because of the receptions volume with him. So that could still be in play, but I'm worried about this offense. So I was okay with that. Then Breece Hall went. Amon St. Brown went right around there. And then Chuba Hubbard. By the time I took Walker, Chase Brown and everybody in ADP at that point and down was gone. So, I mean, I balled over Walker and Hall for the same 2 reasons. And I am stuck on Shanahan and Kubiak running backs. In my lifetime, it has never hurt me going with them. I remember taking flack for taking Arian Foster in the 3rd round before he was a thing and being mocked. You could have. The way I looked at it is I was getting a second running back with high volume in a system that produces nothing but running backs. That's what I was buying into. I didn't care what the guy's name was. I didn't care what his profile was. I wanted the starting running back in that system. And in my opinion, that's what we're getting with Kenneth Walker. And I don't even worry about the worries or the concerns on the line because we heard this with Mike Shanahan offensive lines. He was the first one to start moving to more athletic, smaller linemen. And people are like, oh, this line is terrible. It's off on all these metrics. And yet all they did was open up the right holes. The whole idea of that outside zone scheme is let the defense dictate where you move them to. You let the defense make the move and you just take their momentum with them and create a lane. And you let the running back find the lane. You let the running back get through the first 3-4 yards. And now he's got work to do with the linebackers and the safeties. And I'll take that chances with someone like a Walker or Charbonnet. So my approach is I'm going as heavy volume running back as I can until it hurts.
That's so funny. We're just such opposite thinkers with how we're attacking this draft.
Well, in all fairness, if I was in sleeper, it'd be different. That 2.5, because you don't get the targets, the receptions matter.
Right.
And I'll go back and look, and maybe I am wrong, Fancy. It's 1.5, but like I said, I've also been. We'll pump the brakes on that, there, bud. But I did look at average scores. So what I do is I go in and I actually look at average points per game. Why do I do that? The season long can be misleading, injuries and everything else. Now, I don't stop at the average per game. I still go back and look at totals. But the reason I do both of those things is I want to see how the player scored in the current format. The receivers in this format, the high-end receivers were around 30 a game, but it dropped real quick to that mid-20s. Whereas the running backs, you weren't thinking there'd be running backs that you would love that were right at that 30 points a game. So now in Scott Fish, or in Sleeper, you still get the half point per carry, so those guys will be there. But I would argue 2.5 per reception, you should be focusing on receivers more. I would be anyway. At least the ones you can count on that you know are going to catch the ball. You can't get away with using a receiver that gets 5 or 6 targets a week and doesn't do anything with it in your setup. Mine, we can.
Right. That's why I found it very interesting too with the customization factor. And that's the big thing there. If you want certain customization, you might have to pay for it. And a lot of people are very turned off by it, but we're lucky that hasn't been that way from the get-go and from the start, because if you think about it, these providers should be charging a bit. But now in this day and age, because traffic is just as important, I guess, as that kind of revenue just to charge, because no one wants to pay for anything anymore. So
which bothers me on why. Congrats to Sleeper. I can almost guarantee you they will relook at the scoring options after all this. They have a real big habit of going, wait, this came up. Let's put it to a vote. Let's ask the users, just like they did the last year, they had the injury option thing that didn't go over real well. But they keep trying to do these things. Unlike ESPN, unlike Yahoo, who hasn't changed a darn thing since the inception. Like we talked last week, part of my hatred for Yahoo is I can't stand it. You won't let me pick what day I want for waivers to run. That really bothers me, right? It bothers me. I can't change Fab to $1,000. I want a bigger number on Fab. I want more wiggle room for, the single digit spots, right? Like when it's only $100, the difference between 40 and 30 is 9 digits. And $1,000, 400 and 300 is now that range. So now all of a sudden you could go 330, 350, 372. There's a lot more options, and collectively the money's insignificant because it's faux money anyway. So I like to build it in where there's less chances for ties and all that. And unfortunately, a lot of these old platforms have been around and they get so much traffic because they've been around. People don't want to change their leagues, that they get away with what I would argue is an inferior product, that Sleeper's free. Sleeper has all kinds of options, and it's super easy to use on your phone, and it's free. I love MFL for the customization. I do think it's a little high price, but I've run 2 leagues on it, man. So who am I to judge?
Yeah,
right.
You're a consumer.
Yeah, I'm a consumer, right? Granted, when it was $30, $40 not that long ago, I felt like that was reasonable. Now we're approaching $70, $80, $90, $100. The hard part is now you're charging everybody basically $8 to $10 in your league to run it on this platform, where if you only have a $50 entry fee, now 20% of it's going to just having a platform. That's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
And Rich, let me stop you right there, because I think now is a good time, because we're talking about good values and everything. It's time, I guess we could talk about our partnership that we have at fantasyguru.com with drafters, because you get the deposit bonus, 100% match. And for those, because a lot of these that you see here, and you see it from the graphic below, a lot of these that you see with sign up here, it's for new signups, for new users, not for the Elite Mafia, though, because if you go to drafters.com, which is best balls, we're partnering up with drafters again for another year. You get a reload bonus of 20% too among redeposit, which is huge right there, because like I said, Rich, a lot of this is for rather new users and new subscribers to drafters. So because of that, now Elite Mafia, who managed to dominate their best ball leagues last year, can now do it again and get themselves a little bit of coin reloading.
And can I give a shout out to drafters in general? Like, before we even had a partnership with them, that was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, best ball site to go to. Ever since FanDuel ruined the draft app, which I understand most of those guys are over at Underdog, I happen to like drafters because I think they do a better job of offering some lower price contests. And I like using best balls instead of mocks. I understand the ADP is not the same, but if you want to get in practice in stressful situations, what do you do when you're sniped, that type of stuff, best balls are where it's at. I liked having the dollar leagues, the $2, $3 leagues, and most of the other sites got rid of them. I haven't checked this year for drafters because I haven't been doing much best ball yet. I should start here. I told myself I wasn't going to do best balls until basically mid-July, because last year I did a whole bunch early and it bit me. Like, I thought I was getting values at guys, and I did, but those values didn't come to fruition until way too late in the season. So I happen to love drafters. So reload bonus or not, I'm a fan of drafters in general, man.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a great product. It's very easy to use.
Yes.
So make sure drafters.com, and you can, of course, put the reload bonus code in there if you are an existing member and subscriber of drafters. We were with them last year, partnership. Great job. I've done drafts on drafters before. For me, especially as someone who still likes to use the computer like I'm 80 years old, I appreciate a good user experience, Rich. I'll tell you that much.
That is the one challenge with Sleeper. It is not user-friendly on the PC. It is super user-friendly on the phone. PC, not so much. MFL is kind of the opposite. You don't agree with that, or you do?
No, I do agree with that.
Now, MFL is the opposite, right? I would argue it's easier on the computer than is your phone, unless you use the MFL Platinum app, which is a third-party app. It's not run by MFL. That app does very, very well. It makes it very easy to use on your phone. So I'm a fan of MFL. I keep paying for it. I like Sleeper a lot. Those are basically the 2 platforms I use exclusively now.
So, Rich, let's talk a little bit about a piece of news that came out earlier that I spent some time on. And it's a good time to talk about. Maybe you're someone that really doesn't think about that, but I feel like in this day and age where there's more information right there at our fingertips, especially when you go to fantasyguru.com, the importance of the offensive line, from quarterback to your receivers when it comes to their ceilings. And we found out that Tristan Wirfs is having a procedure on his knee, which for 98, I'd say 85% of players, to say what kind of single impact they make on a line, it wouldn't be too much of a thought. This guy, though, being out for now, we're seeing could go on PUP. He's expected, according to reports, to be missing some time, whether that's 2 games, whether that's a full month if he goes on PUP to start the year, whether it's more than that, i.e. Jonathan Brooks, we didn't know when we get to see him. I mean, you don't know when you're going to see Tristan Wirfs, and when it comes to pass blocking, there's really no one better than him in the game. So for me now, it starts to, I don't want to say turn me off to Baker Mayfield, but it makes me wonder now without Wirfs if he's going to be able to have enough time to hit deep targets. Thus, maybe he relies to throwing to Bucky Irving a little bit more during those times. What do you think about the loss of Wirfs for at least a couple of games does to Baker Mayfield in your eyes?
You know, we needed to temper expectations on Baker with the offensive coordinator change, and now I think we need to temper them again. I don't know if that necessarily equates to more use for the running back in the passing game. And I know I've taken heat for this, but I have talked to offensive linemen, I've talked to coaches, and this is a common theme that comes up. If you're weak at the offensive line, the best thing you can do is run the ball.
Right.
Because it gives the offensive lineman the opportunity to attack. Pass blocking is very technical, and it's quite dangerous, and people don't realize that. Most of the injuries that happen to offensive linemen aren't in the piles, aren't in the run plays. It's pass blocking, because you are forcing yourself to go backwards, get square and low enough, putting a lot of weight on your knees, your legs, and taking a beast of a human running at you at full speed. And I don't think people realize how difficult that is and the technique that goes into it. And we've been leaving offensive linemen hanging with the way the college game has evolved. So I almost wonder, does this mean we see more running? Does this mean Mbuka gets more of a start than we thought with Chris Godwin potentially out? Let's just pretend that Chris Godwin's 100%. I mean, after that injury, I think that's tough to assume, but let's just assume that. I would argue if we're talking about impacts on the passing game, that just means more volume for a guy like Chris Godwin, maybe Otten, somebody in the slot, somebody doing short routes. I think if anything, to your point, this is going to impact Mike Evans because yes, he is one of the best pass blockers in the game. And I'll tell you, any team that loses a starting left tackle is in a world of hurt. They don't usually keep a spare high-end left tackle behind them. There's not many out there. And the teams that do are smart for it. I'll be the first to admit, I don't think as an industry we focus enough on offensive line. I think if we go back and really study the numbers, there is offensive line at the end of the year, how an offensive line ranks by the metrics is a better indicator on fantasy performances for the team. That good offensive line can cover up bad QB play, bad running back play, bad receiver play. So, and we've seen this. I mean, the Vikings offensive line was a big reason, in my opinion, of Sam Darnold having success. That guy finally didn't have to be seeing ghosts and pressures all the time. We've seen the offensive line in Philly, how impressive that has been. When Mike Munchak was in Pittsburgh, didn't matter who the running back was. Didn't matter. They were able to band-aid all sorts of stuff because that offensive line produced. You know, we've talked about Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan, and yeah, people are like, well, we're worried about the line, yet they always seem to find a way to make it good enough. And I would argue that's part of the scheme. So I'm with you. I wish we found a better way to kind of track and document offensive line and focus on it more, because I think that would be a better indicator for us as far as teams we should target when stacking in best balls or even skill position players for redraft.
No, 1,000%. And Jeff Mans has been saying this for a very long time. And and I said this at the start of the stream, while back, even 10 years ago, we're still focused on getting that running back, get those running backs, get them, go, just get them. You need to get them. You need to get 2, sometimes 3 and 4 or 5 rounds. Now, what it comes down to, because the research now with what we're looking for, what the casual player is looking for, it's different now. It's more advanced. They know to look for this stuff. They weren't focused as much even for receivers, which is wild to think about. There wasn't as much talk about targets necessarily, and quality of targets, and now there's all that. And so with that, we got to make sure that when someone like Tristan Wirfs goes down, because look, they're saying it could be 2 games. To me, I think of this, he's having surgery 2 months before the season. He's out at least 6 weeks.
Do you know how much heat I took last year when I kept mocking people because they kept talking about Brooks? And I said, why are you guys pushing Brooks when the odds of us seeing him before mid-November are slim to none? No, everything's trending. He's going to be ready. Everything's trending. I'm like, people, how many people have come back from an ACL injury in less than a year? He had surgery like November 11th. And oh no, Adrian Peterson. I'm like, so you've got some outliers. I do not understand the people that downplay these injuries, Pensty. I really don't.
Can I ask you one question, though, to kind of argue with him a bit? Because I kind of was wondering this, too, when I was thinking about this throughout the season. Do you think that maybe Brooks could have come back a little sooner, but Chuba Hubbard was just freaking dominating that they didn't need to, and why waste him at that point? Let's ride this out to see. And then what? Then they ended up extending Hubbard after that. But I feel like maybe they didn't realize what they had in Chuba Hubbard because I guess once like week 3 hit and beyond, there was no stopping this guy for a while. And then now you have Brooks who's coming back from major injury. It just makes me wonder for this particular situation, if he not saying it would justify drafting the unknown because everybody knew what they were going into and damaged goods of a player we've not seen play on a professional level. That is your fault if you were still willing to draft him in the 7th round. But maybe they kept him out a little longer to play it safe because Hubbard was doing so well?
I would disagree because Hubbard was still doing well when they brought him back.
True.
And he got another catastrophic injury. So then the question is, did they bring him back too soon? Was the year point still not enough? I mean, there was no reason to rush this guy back anyway. They were losing. Chuba was doing well. But I don't think, even if Chuba was struggling, I don't know that maybe if he was really struggling, you go, why not? He's ready, right? But I'd still argue they probably should have waited a little bit longer because it's not common for them to re-tear the same ACL, man. That's alarming. And I feel bad because I'm very concerned about Brooks' career, period, now. I'm not sure we ever get a taste of Brooks. And if you go, because I did a write-up on him last year, you go back to his high school days, like there's a lot to like about this young man. And had he not been injured, he probably would have been the number 1 back picked no matter what. Like we would have been hearing a little bit more hype on him, you know? So maybe I find it funny that people wanted to deny history. When I hear an ACL injury, I automatically go 12 months, automatically.
Right.
Hawkinson tore his. So going into last year, I'm going, guys, we're not going to have Hawk until the last third of the season, and then he's probably not going to be 100%. Be cautious of that. Well, people wanted to be aggressive. Got to get our guy. Same thing with Brooks. If I had Chuba, maybe I rolled the dice Brooks in the last couple of rounds, but for where he was going in ADP, I got him nowhere because I wasn't going to pay that for a guy that I was willing to bet my nutsack on wouldn't be playing until mid-November. And people just kept telling me, you're not a doctor. Well, okay, but I played this game for 30 years. Once we got rid of the steroids, people haven't come back from injury fast, and they haven't come back from injury well. There is definitely a delay and a buildup now. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm okay bringing back some of the roids, man. I want to see these guys on the field. I want to see the performances. I miss some of that. It's their personal prerogative what they want to do. So, you know, whatever. That's a whole different topic. But
people take timetables way too seriously. They think, oh,
they do.
On the pup list, he'll be back week 5. No.
How do you know?
That just means they're eligible to return in week 5. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a guarantee that they'll be healthy.
Okay.
And that's why, by the way, this Wirfs injury, which I didn't think before when I woke up this morning, I'd be spending
I had no idea.
A combined half the stream talking about it. This is freaking major.
It is. It is. This impacts that entire offense. And people were excited about this offense. Baker was still a value, even with the Cohen change, all of these things. But now you have to question the running backs. Now you have to question the receivers. Now you have to question the quarterbacks. And here's the thing. It's medical. We will never get clarity from NFL coaches and teams on these injuries. One, they don't want to relay information to other teams that could give them a competitive advantage or make them an easy target. 2, they're always going to be coy. And 3, they don't know how Snare is going to play out. I was going to say, let's look at Chris Olave. He was supposedly okay to come back at a certain point. They didn't bring him back. Why? Why rush him back and potentially harm him for next year? Let's let him rest. We're not winning. We're not proving anything. There's no need to. So that plays into, did that play with Brooks? Potentially, right? I don't necessarily think so, but absolutely it's a worthwhile question. Because why rush a guy you just spent draft capital on and hurry back just to see him be in harm's way? Like, I'll be the first to admit, I'd much rather these teams set these guys instead of rushing them back. I don't want to see Godwin at 50%. I want to see Godwin at 95%. That means I got to wait a month. Much rather wait a month and put him on IR than this BS game of on, off, on, off, on, off, and all the other nonsense that goes in with it.
I'm with you, man. And that's why, I mean, you mentioned someone like Chris Godwin here. And yeah, I mean, the guy relatively healthy most of his career, but then now coming off an injury, yeah, you got to question these things sometimes. And people get excited. And that's why, to kind of bring this conversation full circle, that's why when it comes to things like average draft position and everything, people react, and that messes with the ADP. You have to still stay the course and not let that mess with you. I used to do that a lot, and it screwed me up. So be careful when it comes to how you're valuing these players versus how you're seeing them be valued by others. If you're doing the work, you're reading these content at FG, you will be in a good place. Don't let the noise around you impact or dictate.
No, we were doing so good. Yeah, and I don't trust ADP at all. I just don't. I hate averages.
To everybody who's on, by the way, I just lost power for a quick second. So thank you very much for hanging out. I'm sorry about the technical glitch that we just had. Thank you for tuning in to and hanging out on Fantasy Sports Daily here on the Elite Plus Network. I'm Justin Fensterman. Make sure you go to fantasyguru.com to get all things fantasy football content. Just continues to come out. Make sure you catch Jeff Bands on the Elite Sports Show today, 2 p.m. Eastern, the new time on Fantasy Sports Radio, Channel 87. Ray Flowers will be with him. For Rich Maletto, my guest, who's always awesome, I'm Justin Fensterman. Have a great day. Let's get it. Let's win right here. It's Fantasy Sports Daily. Ray Flowers back tomorrow. Same time, noon Eastern, same place right here. The Elite Plus Network, powered by fantasyguru.com.